Congressman Paul joins us this morning from Clute, Texas. Great to see you, Congressman. I love this. CPAC is made up mostly of young men. They're very fiscally conservative, and this is the second year in a row that you've won. Why do you win it? Why do you win it the past 2 years in a row? What do you think?
Well, there's some days I try to figure it out because I'm always pleasantly surprised that there's such enthusiasm. But then again, I think maybe it's because young people like the message of freedom. You know, I talk a different message, obviously, than other candidates. I talk about personal liberty, personal choices, which is something the others don't talk about. And the foreign policy is quite different. I make sure they know that I never want to reinstitute the draft and have no draft registration, and I don't ever want to go to war without declaration. And they see war and our foreign policy as a drain. I think that is a very, very strong message. And everybody knows I'm a fiscal conservative a long time before it was popular. And it comes together, and young people, I just think they have begun to realize that something has to change and the burden is falling on their shoulders. So I'm delighted that the young people are enthusiastic about this message.
I think it's interesting as well because if you do decide to run, you'll be 77 when you run. On top of that, you're not a huge social conservative. This is one of the largest social conservatives gatherings, and you're a libertarian. What do you think your appeal is among some of the young social conservatives?
Well, I don't know where you got the idea that I'm not a social conservative.
Well, I mean, it's not the, well, when you gave your speech, I mean, you talked a lot about, about going to war and our foreign policy and making sure that we're not, I mean, there wasn't a lot of talk about gay marriage and whether or not that's going to be a huge issue for you come 2012, gun rights, etc.
Yeah, what I talk about is freedom and let people make their own choices. And I make the point that in our socialized and our religious lives in the First Amendment, you get to make your own choices, and therefore we should be tolerant of others. But it's the same message I apply to economics, which is a challenge to the left, because I want everybody to make their own choice about how to spend their money. And it makes a lot of sense and it comes together. But I'm strong right to life, and I happen to have been married for 53 years. So, it's hard to say that I'm not a social conservative.
Freedom to make your own decisions and right to life don't always go together, though.
Excuse me again?
I said freedom to make your own decisions, as you talk about giving people the ability to make their own decisions, and the right to life movement don't always go together.
Well, I don't see a conflict at all. It's just how you get there. Compulsion is one thing. Fair and equal distribution of wealth is something I think people would sort of like to see everybody share in a large middle class. Well, some people want to do it by compulsion, and some people want to do it through the marketplace. I happen to believe that sound money and free markets produce more wealth and distribute it more fairly. Now, others will say you have to do it by compulsion. Now, if I have conservative values, I just happen to accept the fact that you can't compel people to do it. You can't compel other nations to live the way we want, and you can't compel individuals. I want people not to use drugs, but I think it's a responsibility of the parents and the community and the church. And no matter how much compulsion, prohibition doesn't work.
Yeah.
None of us like to see drunk drivers out on the road, so prohibition wasn't achieved. Prohibition wasn't successful. So prohibition in personal lifestyles and prohibition in how we live, it just doesn't work. So the goals are one thing. The method of achieving that is the real issue. And I just take a different approach. It's through voluntarism and persuasion. And this, to me, makes sense in a free country. Otherwise, you have an authoritarian country, and it doesn't work. I mean, look at the failure of our foreign policy today. We're trying to impose our goodness around the world by force. It doesn't work. So that's why I opt on the side of voluntarism.
I want to just play one of the moments of the conference that got a lot of attention. That was Donald Trump speaking about your chances of being elected president. Let's listen.
Frankly, I wish there was a candidate that I saw that would be fantastic, because I love what I'm doing. In fact, I have a great club that's 15 minutes away. By the way, Ron Paul cannot get elected, I'm sorry to tell you. Sorry.
What did you think about what Trump said about you, that you can't get elected?
Well, I hadn't thought much about it, because when he said I hadn't heard about it. People have ask me about it. But that makes me think about back in the times when I first ran, because everybody knows my positions have been exactly the same 30 years ago when I first ran for office. I run in a very conservative Bible Belt district, and I challenge everything George Bush did practically. And people say, you can't win with that. You're too much of a strict constitutionalist. You want such little government. You actually want to balance the budget. You can't win. This won't work. So I've won 11 times. So I don't know whether he has earned the the right to criticize somebody for not winning an election when I don't know how many elections he's won so far himself.
Do you think he can win if he puts himself forth and tries to get in the primary there?
Well, I have no idea. It's too early to say. I guess everybody has a chance. I mean, once you put your name out there, you always have that chance of winning.
Yeah, speaking of your chances, I mean, you ran for president in 2008, and you still have yet to decide whether you're going to do it in 2012, but you got less than 2% of the vote among Republicans in the primary. What can change in 2012 to make you a more viable candidate?
Well, I don't know what poll you're quoting. I mean, that's generally the way they do it. You know, it's sort of like the poll we had at CPAC. Now, if somebody else had won it, it would have been a grand victory. But immediately, even before the poll, would say, oh, it doesn't have any meaning. So people come along with these polls and say, I have 2% of the vote. I think that's a distortion of what's reality is going on. But I wouldn't think that I have 40% or 50%. I'm not saying that. But, I think there's a lot of people very, very interested. And some days I sort of think, well, maybe if there were less, I could just go away and relax a bit. But it seems like the enthusiasm of those number of people, which I know numbers up to more than 2%, makes me keep thinking, what should I do and when should I do it? So it's not an easy decision for me, and I am still thinking about it, but there's a large number of people who care about freedom. Matter of fact, I keep thinking it's growing by leaps and bounds. If you ask me what my support was 3 or 4 years ago compared to now, I mean, just think of what they're talking about. Just like how many people are talking about the Federal Reserve now. How many people are talking about stopping foreign aid and seeing the foolishness of our foreign policy. I mean, people are getting serious about this. I mean, I think this week was a good reflection. The Republican leadership wants to tinker with the budget, and there's been more pressure put on them to cut a little bit more. I'd like to put a lot more pressure on them because they're still not addressing the fact, the true problems of how much needs to be done. So I would say the momentum of the freedom movement is gigantic. I mean, it's growing by leaps and bounds, which is very encouraging to me and puts more pressure on me just not to take a rest for a while either.
Well, you certainly do have an enthusiastic crowd of supporters, that's for sure. Congratulations on winning CPAC second year in a row. Congressman Ron Paul, always great to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.